From Central Indiana's #1 news source, this is Fox 59 Tonight.
And we're back here on Fox 59 Tonight with Representative Ed DeLaney, District 86, representing the north and northwest side of Indianapolis. You got most of Pike Township, Washington Township, and you sliver down and get to that Center Township IPS area.
IPS, not Center Township, but yeah.
Yes, yeah. You get the outside of Center Township IPS portion of the district.
Right.
And so let me ask you about schools while we just kind of hit on that. That portion of IPS is in Washington Township. Nevertheless, you were quite vocal this past school year on the impact of charter schools, which have expressed lots of interest in getting into both Pike Township and Washington Township. But the Indianapolis Local Education Alliance has been formed to figure out how Indianapolis Public Schools and how charter schools will share resources and maybe govern together different ways that they have now set it. The ILEA had its first meeting just this past week. It is now a thing, and so now the ILEA has to, between now and the end of 2025, so not a lot of time, has to figure this out. Or, it seems to me, it seems like they're saying, IPS, charters, y'all come together with the mayor, figure this out on your own, or next session we'll figure it out for you. Do I understand it right?
Yeah, you got it right. There are some people that would close IPS down. I don't think there's any logic to that or any basis for that, but it's gotten a lot of attention, and I'm hopeful that this alliance will be helpful. I was one of the people who put together this proposal. It's time for us all to be adults, okay? So, first of all, people like me have to recognize that there's some very good charter schools. The Heron School is a good example. So, we want those. We don't want to get rid of one good, functioning, successful charter school, okay? We have to. They, on the other hand, have to understand. For example, in my neighborhood, the #1 gripe I hear about IPS in my district, and I'm one of the few people that represents a lot of IPS. The #1 complaint is my kid didn't get into school 84. That's because it's such a good school. People want in. So we have success, and we have some very poor schools. We've got to figure out how to focus on that instead of this cat fight between how many more dollars the charters get and how many more dollars the public schools get, and this administrative chaos we've created. People have no understanding. We have multiple types of charter schools and multiple types of traditional schools and multiple types of innovation schools. We need to clean a lot of that out. And I think a #1 thing is we need more mayoral authority. We cannot have, as currently allowed, 60 different organizations authorizing charter schools in our county. We have to have a coherent system that says this is what we need, these are functioning, these are not, and the ones who are not have to go. Because a failing charter school hurts itself, hurts its kids, but also hurts IPS because it took the money, from IPS students and now from property taxes in order to produce a poor product. Why would we do that? And there are things we can do together. The building issue has been nothing but trouble. We amend the law every year as to what happens if IPS wants to close a building. And it's got to be a joke, okay? We got to stop this joke and say, these are public assets. The mayor's office, in my view, ought to control the disposition of them if they want to turn it into a public facility or housing, whatever. The idea of giving a building away for $1 to what may well be an unproven charter school is just nonsense, and IPS gets its back up when it's asked to do that and finds ways around it. We got to stop playing games about these things. This is very hard, though. This is very hard work. I think if we look at the buildings and to a lesser extent maybe at the transportation issue, we can find ways to cooperate between the charter schools and the traditional schools, and that'd be the first best thing we could do is find some ways to cooperate. But I mean, for example, I'm a lawyer. I read the other day that somebody from Chicago wants to form a legal-oriented high school. Hello. No, we don't need any such thing. That may be your idea. You may think that's great. You may draw in some parents. I'm a lawyer, been a lawyer a long time. You need to read, write, and be able to get up on your 2 feet and speak.
Mhm.
And you can learn that in a traditional high school without calling it a legal center of any sort.
Mhm.
And no law school is going to let you in because you went to a legal-oriented high school. So come on. We got to stop these glory projects, these vanity projects that we have, and get serious about what we're trying to get done in our schools. So I'm hopeful the Alliance will work. Some issues are so hard. For example, we got bonds. We owe money on buildings.
Mhm.
We're taking money away from IPS. How are we going to pay for those bonds? So we got fiscal issues that are fundamental because in Indiana, we pay our bonds. I mean, we just do. So it's a big challenge. I am hopeful. I think the commission is well put together, represents different groups, um, and that's good. But I'm looking for some wins.
Mhm.
I'm not looking for a total solution for all the problems of IPS and its charters. I just don't think that's possible in 6 months. But if we could find some things on which we could cooperate, that would be good.
I understand the transportation side of this debate in a way that most people um, don't. And people who are familiar with me here at Fox59 or on the radio know that I have driven school buses for this is 11 or 12 years now, and I own a school bus company in Indianapolis. And so I have heard the things that they would like to do, um, and uh, I have thoughts. Um, they're the hardest part, and you touched on it, um, is you have all the charter schools on one side that are 60 different units.
Yeah.
You have no collective voice over there to say, we as the charters, whether we're innovation charters or independent charters or even the private schools in the mix, this is what we want. You have no unified voice on that side. Whereas on the IPS side, you have Dr. Johnson and the school board saying, this is what we want. And so that I asked, I had Brandon Brown here back during session, and I asked him, would you be in favor if only the mayor's office had authorizing power and that the mayor's office of innovation acted as essentially the superintendent for the charters? Brandon didn't say that the mayor should be the only person to do it, but he was they liked the direction of the mayor having a lot of the control. Do other people who are in these circles in ILEA understand that that is the hurdle of you got 60 people and one person? It's 60 versus one.
You need coherence, and we can't have all kinds of different groups authorizing these schools and then having 60 different transportation policies. Yes, I saw there was a hearing in the House on this very issue of transportation to the charters. And there were people who stood up who basically said, I live in the extreme northwest corner of the county, and I want my kid to go to a charter school in the extreme southeast, and I want you to pay for it. And everybody's going like, no.
Correct.
And then somebody was bright enough to come up and point out on that kid's route how many private, charter, and public schools that kid would pass at public expense to get to the one place they wanted. So we've got to figure out how to deal with what the public wants and with these different institutions. Yeah, I was surprised to learn that some charter schools have no interest in transportation. They don't want anything to do with it. They'll say that.
Correct.
So what's their role in all of this? I think
now getting money though.
Yeah, they'll be getting money, and they'll allocate it how they want. But I think one other facet is Indigo could play a greater role. They go by multiple schools in some cases. I see kids going to Heron, for example, on the bus in my neighborhood. So we can find a way to do this. But what's good about this is mostly a matter of money, not ideology. And I think the buildings are the same way. It's only about money. It's not about who teaches the kid or whether the kid's getting high grades. So we need to take some of those money issues and have victories on those as far as cooperation between IPS and the charters, and then we can begin some dialogue and get moving forward on some of the tougher issues. Like what do you do with a school that's not doing well, whether it's an IPS school or a charter school? Those are the tougher issues. The other thing I'm be very blunt about this. It troubles me that we have so much national money and national interest. No. Bill Gates is a lovely guy, but why he's kicked money into school board races in Indiana is beyond my comprehension. I don't want his money. He can't be busy figuring out what our needs are. So we've got to say we want our schools, charter and traditional, to succeed. Not because it will send a message to the world that charter is a solution to problems. And not that it's to say that traditional schools are the solution. No, let's just fix our problems and let's not have this big national fight, which we've gotten very much in the center of it, I think to our detriment. The kids have to win. We've got to do that. And that's another reason to try to take buildings and buses sort of out of the picture so that fewer of our staff are fooling with that stuff and more are fooling with teaching the kids, right? Sitting next to the kid, helping the kid, or resolving the problems in particular schools. That's what we got to get to.
Is there well, let me ask you this. Do you believe that there are people who absolutely wake up in the morning and their mission is to destroy and dismantle IPS?
There are people who are willing to say that. The number who are willing to say that openly is not high. But my test from the legislature is, where you put your money is where your love is. So less and less as a percentage of education money goes to traditional public schools. Okay. So IPS is a traditional public school system. But there are people who are tired of it. And that's just a normal human reaction. They're tired of all the controversies about IPS. They just want to be done with it. So, okay, get rid of it. That's not a very adult approach. What we need to do is take some of the problems off. That's what I like about this alliance. Let's take some of the allocation of buildings issues. Let's not spend the superintendent spending all the time figuring out what to do with John Marshall High School on the east side. Let's have her figure out what to do with the kids who no longer go to that school. So take some of these pressures off. That'll help everybody. But yeah, there are people who would get rid of IPS tomorrow. And partly it's because some of them want a trophy. They want to say that in this city, the charter movement crushed a public school district. Well, that's pretty cynical. And we have a district. We have kids and parents. You have a movement. God love you in your movement. But don't be crushing our system or ignoring our kids. And don't pretend that you don't have failing charter schools. I've said for years, I've watched IPS for a long time. I've said this, rarely said it publicly. IPS has served a very special function, which is to be the whipping boy. So all the other districts get far less attention than they deserve with their problems. We don't hear about them because we've got this one guy that's got problems, and we're going to just crush him. The other thing I said, this going back 40 years, I remember when I started saying it, in Marion County, we either have 10 too many school districts or 1 too few. Okay? I've decided it's the 1 too few. It's got to be the mayor's office or some central device. It shouldn't necessarily be his office, but some central mechanism that will deal with buildings, transportation, and with the quantity of needs. How many schools do we need? And how many specialized charter schools do we need? And how many specialized IPS schools? We need somebody to put that together. And I think that would be very helpful. You get into very sensitive territories, because you got all these school boards. But
well, you go back. You're going back to Unigov and the exclusion of public schools from that plan is why we have 11 different school districts in Marion County.
That's right. Exactly.
Most people don't realize that in other cities, the entire city is one school district.
I'll give you an example. I sit next to a good friend of mine, Tanya Paff, who's from Terre Haute. And she's as bright as a penny, and she's a school teacher, retiring as a school teacher, math teacher. And she's constantly struck by what's going on in IPS. And I kept saying, well, why are you having trouble following this? in Terre Haute, Vigo County, they have one school district for the whole county.
Yep.
None of this jazz about West Terre Haute's not getting it or, whatever.
Mhm.
They don't have that.
Mhm.
They have a coherent system.
Mhm.
They got their mayor helping build a school.
Mhm.
Hello, we have the exact opposite. Yes, we suffer from that. That decision was made when Unigov was passed. I've often kidded that when Dick Lugar goes to the pearly gates, I guess he's already there. He was asked, "What about those schools?"
Uh-huh.
Other than that, the guy had a brilliant record. But it's our job now to answer the question that Dick Lugar is facing, which is, what can we do to make the schools in this county function? But very specifically in IPS, we got to be careful about not drifting into everybody else's problems. And if we do fix IPS or improve it, it will only help the other districts.
Mhm.
It could show them ways to save money, things, create institutions they could cooperate with. It could be, has a real upside. It's not just saving IPS,
Mhm.
it's building IPS. So I have my hope, but I wish the task was simpler and the
Well,
time frame longer.
It's you call it the whipping boy, and I always say that IPS ends up being the punching bag.
Yeah.
Even in the news, because I've said this here, like in Indianapolis, if you add it up, the majority of the students who live in Indianapolis do not go
Right.
to IPS.
Right.
They are divided amongst the other 10. And so we only focus on that one. So even when there's good stuff,
Right.
Perry Township is the second largest school district in Marion County, and they do something good or bad. It doesn't, first day of school, it's like, it doesn't matter over there.
Right.
Or if Pike Township does something, it doesn't matter. It only matters when it's at IPS,
Right.
and it's like
Yeah.
we're actually neglecting, like, I don't know what the exact, but geographically, we're only focused on 1 out of 10.
Yeah, one of the things that's fascinating about that, when they passed some of these so-called reforms for education, the biggest change actually was allowing you to go out of district to a school you want to go to. The largest number of transfers out of any public school is not to a parochial school, not to a charter school, not to a private school. The largest number is to another school district, which for some reason they're attracted to or live near or have whatever. And that really confuses the financing, the planning, the attendance. It's a people like it. Obviously, they use it, so that's the proof that they like it. But it causes major ramifications in terms of planning and enrollment and so forth. So we got to deal with that. But you're right. IPS always has had a large number of kids going to Catholic schools in particular and to other private schools. Always had that. But 20 years ago, they weren't going to Pike if they lived in IPS. And we changed that. And so, yeah, we got to look at that. And of course, my goal would be that fewer want to leave the district. I want the whole county, the whole IPS system to be like my neighborhood, where the only gripe is we want more access to these schools because they're good. But it's not easy.
I don't think we'll ever see a day. I think we're too far away that we'd ever have the Marion County Public School District. I don't think that'll ever happen. But the mayor has said one of his goals was that he wanted to look at how the mayor's office could better govern, let's say, education. And I think this ILEA and him having some governance over more of the charter schools is probably the closest we'll get.
Yeah, and it's that's all we can ask at this moment, I think. But it's a bigger ask than people may think. I just the example because I'm a lawyer. The bond lawyers alone could spend the next century figuring out how to merge, any debt on a charter school with the debt on the traditional public school, and who would pay, and what are we doing when we give the property tax away? Yeah, so it's complex, but I think there's a lot of goodwill. My sources tell me the mayor did a very good job of showing real interest at that first meeting.
I was there.
And so, that's hopeful.
Is there, are you hopeful that that there will be some actual legitimate helpful um, recommendations that come out of this to where the state house can stay out of it next session?
I think if I was guessing, if we can figure out the solution to the building issue when IPS doesn't need a building, the legislature would love to offload that. So if we send the legislature something they don't want to hear about,
Mhm.
they're sick. Remember, there's only about 12 or 15 of us from Marion County. The vast majority of the legislature could care less about who has these buildings, but they have to vote every year on a new change and a new adjustment. If we said, here's an example, we can bring you this one issue. We're getting rid of this crisis about giving buildings away for a buck because we're setting up an agency through the mayor's office to control the buildings or facilities. They'd be happy. And I think that would be enough for them to say, you're heading in the right direction. They might then say, but your next task is X, or you're not moving fast enough. But some real progress on taking something off their table that shouldn't be on the legislature's table
Is there some
is a plus.
is there a world where, let's say, and we could have used John Marshall as an example, but we've got a plan for that now. But if IPS said, "Hey, we don't need this building," what about in a world where that is then transferred to the control of the city of Indianapolis?
That's sort of where you have to get to, in my view. Control, in some sense. Ownership and control don't have to be the same, but
Right.
somebody's got to be able to say the best thing we can do with this, as has happened, by the way, before all these laws. You look around this town, how many apartment buildings are former IPS school buildings?
Yeah.
And they seem to be fully occupied. Often they're senior buildings, but not always. Uh, if the mayor said the best thing we can do, we have a housing shortage, is we'll find a way to pay off the debt on this building, we'll take it over and we'll have housing units. Okay, and we got some nearby athletic fields we don't need, we'll make them a park or we'll sell them for apartments. What an intelligent result instead of this cat fighting that we've been doing.
Because giving them away for $1 only helps if you're a charter school.
Right, if you're the recipient.
Correct.
Yeah, and even then, by the way, you're then stuck sometimes with a building much bigger than you needed with great costs of operation and maintenance. So it's just not a smart game. So that's probably the one best thing we could do. You're helping me here. Is say we're going to address that issue. We're going to come up with a solution to that issue. And we're going to tell you these are the next things. I think the legislatures would be open to hearing. Here's a win, and here's the next win we want, but we're not ready yet.
And if, because in that situation, even if IPS still owned the building, but then the city controls it, there isn't that feeling of, well, the district still paid X amount of millions of dollars to build that building, and it's gone now.
Yeah, that's hard. That's unacceptable. That's why we have the problem. I mean, IPS is never going to voluntarily say, "Oh, here, take my building I just redid 10 years ago. Just take it away and give me a buck." Come on, that's abnormal.
We're just about out of time, but I want to ask one, as people, we have a part-time legislature here in Indiana, so you guys are not working at the state house right now. But what do you advise people to do in making contact with their local representatives, even when session isn't going? Because if you're just now reaching out during session, it's really too late because the bills and the decisions are already there. What do you advise people how when they can stay in contact with you and stay engaged?
I think this is actually the best time to contact your representative because while we shrink our staff when we're off, there's still more than adequate staff to answer constituent inquiries. So this is the best time because they're not overwhelmed and they're not training new interns and new staff. So it's a fairly stable moment. So yeah, this is the good time to get, and your legislator may have more time to read or think or talk. So yeah, pretend that this is the right time to contact the legislature. Yeah, the schedule, I know enough about what the supermajority is doing, but they have deadlines in the governor's office that, like by Labor Day, if some Republican wants to introduce a bill, they got to get it to the governor's office by Labor Day to try to get his reactions. They don't necessarily need his approval, but they get these very early deadlines. So this is the time. Yeah.
Now is the time.
Now is the time.
build those relationships,
Right.
have those discussions. Now, you might find out that you like your local representative, and most people actually don't even know who those people are.
Right.
So
Yeah.
look them up. Look them up. It's an interesting time in politics, for sure.
You got that.
So it is nice to it would be nice to see everybody just get along, but I don't think, especially what's happening at the federal level, is going to help us at all at the local level. Um, Speaking of local level, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but it did just pop in my head when this morning they said DeLaney's available, and I thought about you recently after the attack on the Minnesota lawmakers. One, of course, was assassinated, the other survived. But when that happened, I thought about you. I was like, we had that happen, but it was long ago. Thank God you're still here. You survived.
That was not a political attack. That was
Correct.
it was a remnant of my law practice. But yeah, a guy tried to kill me.
Which I thought was which was why they didn't call it an assassination attempt. It was an attempted murder.
Right.
Because of that case from 25 years, 26 years before you were actually attacked. But I thought about you because you've still been in that position, and I wonder what you think.
Well, I have a family, and they thought immediately, so I got thinking. And we've met with the state police. We're making changes to our, call it, security plan at our home, and I'm talking to other members. I think the legislators are acting wisely. I'm very impressed with the facilities the state police have to advise us. They're not going to post somebody at your house, but and I think a number of the members have jumped, in with both feet to change things. And yeah, I had a visit just the other day from the state police. It was I was encouraged by their interest and also impressed by their knowledge. So I think we will quietly improve things. We have to. The climate in this country has just gotten dangerous.
You feel safe though. You feel good about what that Indiana.
Look, my personal experience was such that I have no complaints that I'm sitting here. Okay, so that's my view. So I try to have a combination of gratitude and caution. That's my goal.
Again, the best way that it's unfortunate we even have to have that discussion. You guys even have to think about that, but these are the times that we're in when we have the decisions that are being made and how they're impacting people. It's troubling and it's concerning to see how people might react.
It is very disturbing, especially what I call the lone wolf.
Yes.
I mean, you don't know they're there, and they're mad at you. Yeah. So caution is important, but you have responsibilities. I don't want to see people discouraged from running. We need good, qualified people, and we don't need to be scaring them from running. And so it's a very, very difficult moment. Language, I think, is central to this. I mean, we got to stop calling people names, which is coming out of the White House every day. We got to be able to say we disagree. Not this is the most stupid program by a communist, unheard of, insulting, and all that stuff. We've got to watch that, and that means some of my people too. I mean, it's not just all the Republicans. You can't feed anger and expect that it will not result in something.
Representative Ed DeLaney, thank you for your years of service. Thank you for coming in and explaining these topics to us. There was a lot going on.
Oh, you're right, Cameron.
We'll stay in touch. And again, this is the time to find your state lawmaker, find your state rep, your state senator, and tell them what you want them to do so that when session comes, I think they have these bills already planned out. People are talking right now. So, got to get on board. That's going to do it for this edition of FOX59 Tonight. I'm Cameron Little. We'll talk to you on my radio show on Sunday on 106.7 WTLC and on Hot 100.9. Until then, have a good night.
Thank you.